My son's wife looked me straight in the eye in front of her entire family and called me the Maid. The room went silent, my heart shattered, but she smirked as if she had won. For years, I raised my son alone, sacrificed everything, even bought the very house she bragged about living in. Yet here I was, reduced to free labor, invisible, stripped of dignity. But greed blinds people, pride poisons them. And what she didn't know was this: the house she mocked me in was mine. And one day, I would make her face that truth. I never imagined my retirement would look like this. For more than 30 years, I stood at the blackboard, chalk in hand, teaching children how to read and count. I was proud of that life, proud that even after my husband died when David was just 10, I managed to keep going. Every penny I saved, every sacrifice I made was for him. When I finally signed the papers to buy my little house, I believed I had built a safe haven that would carry me through the rest of my years. But when David married Sophia and they had their first child, the situation shifted. Sophia suggested it would be more convenient if I moved in with them for a while. She was pregnant. She said she would need help, and David echoed her request. My heart swelled at the thought of being closer to my grandchild, so I agreed. I packed my books, my garden tools, and a few boxes of memories, and told myself it was temporary. I thought I was walking into a new chapter of warmth and family connection. At first, it almost felt that way. The baby's laugh filled the house like sunlight. I cooked stews and baked pies the way I used to for David when he was young. I scrubbed the counters, swept the floors, and folded laundry late into the night. I read bedtime stories with my glasses perched on the edge of my nose, watching my grandchild's eyes grow heavy with trust. Those moments wrapped me in a fragile sense of belonging, and I clung to them. Sophia smiled a lot in those early weeks. "You're such a blessing, Margaret," she would say. "We're so lucky you're here." Her words felt sweet, and though her tone sometimes carried a sharp edge I couldn't quite name, I chose to believe her sincerity. After all, wasn't this what I had always wanted? To be needed? To be part of their lives? Yet small cracks began to appear. Sophia started setting rules that didn't feel like kindness, but control. "Let's keep the kitchen closed after 8, she announced one evening, smiling as if it were just a household quirk. "It helps keep the house in order." Another day, she gently corrected me. "Please don't teach him your old methods, Margaret. Times have changed. He needs modern parenting." She said it sweetly, but her words lodged in my chest like a splinter. David didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed, but chose silence. Whenever Sophia spoke over me, his lips pressed together, his eyes drifted away. He'd nod quickly, as if agreeing was easier than confronting. I watched my son, my boy I had raised alone, fade into the background of his own marriage, and with him went the voice I once believed would defend me. The change was subtle, like water boiling slowly before it scalds. At first, I brushed it off. They were young, they had their ways, maybe I was being too sensitive. But the signs kept coming. Sophia started arranging my day, when I could shop, when I should take the baby for a walk, even what meals I ought to cook. She didn't ask, she instructed, and David said nothing. One afternoon, while folding laundry in the guest room, I overheard her on the phone. Her laugh was light, careless, as she told a friend, "Honestly, it's like having free help around. She does everything. Cooking, cleaning, babysitting. It's convenient." I froze, the shirt trembling in my hands. Free help. That's all I was to her. Not a mother, not family, just unpaid labor. I didn't confront her. I didn't even finish folding the laundry. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the window, listening to her voice drifting down the hallway. A lifetime of sacrifice reduced to a cheap convenience. I wanted to scream, but the words stuck. That night, I tucked my grandson into bed. His little hand clung to my finger, his breath soft and steady. I bent close and whispered, "Grandma will always be here for you." Tears pricked my eyes as I kissed his forehead, the kind of tears that carry both love and sorrow. I wanted to believe it was true, that no matter what, I could stay near him. But deep inside, a small, painful voice whispered otherwise. I turned off the lamp and walked into the dim hallway, my footsteps heavy with the weight of a truth I wasn't ready to face. My place in this house was changing, shifting into something I could no longer deny. But little did I know, I wasn't invited as a mother. I was positioned as something far less. The invitation came weeks in advance. Sophia was buzzing with energy, eager to host her parents and extended family in her home. I spent days preparing dishes, scrubbing corners no one would notice, polishing the silverware that once belonged to my mother. In my heart, I hoped this gathering might be a chance to feel included, to be seen as more than just a helper in the background. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft blue sweater David had once said made my eyes look kind. The night of the dinner, laughter spilled through the house as relatives arrived. Plates of food were passed, glasses clinked, and conversation flowed. I stood at the edge of the dining room, watching Sophia glow in the spotlight. She was charming, clever, basking in the admiration of her family. When her father complimented the warmth of the home, saying, "You've made such a beautiful place for yourselves," I felt a small smile tug at my lips. It was, after all, the house I had built for David. But then Sophia laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the chatter. She raised her glass and said, "Oh, that's thanks to our maid. Margaret keeps it spotless." The room froze for half a heartbeat. My name hung in the air, poisoned by that single word, Maid. Some guests forced a laugh, others looked down at their plates. David shifted in his chair, eyes fixed on his drink, unwilling to meet mine. My throat tightened. My chest ached. I felt as if the floor had vanished beneath me. I forced a small smile, the kind you give to save face when your dignity has already been stripped away. Inside, I was crumbling. I had endured years of sacrifice, loneliness, and hard work, and in one casual sentence, Sophia erased it all. The night dragged on. Sophia entertained, David stayed silent, and I moved like a shadow through the room, clearing plates and pouring drinks. No one spoke of the insult. No one defended me. By the time the last guest left, my legs were trembling, my hands shaking as I wiped down the counters. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Memories spilled into the silence. David as a boy with scraped knees. The nights I stayed up late sewing clothes because we couldn't afford new ones. The morning I signed the mortgage papers alone, promising myself I would give him stability. Every image contrasted cruelly with the humiliation I had just endured. Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't just from hurt. They were from a dawning realization. I wasn't family here. I was a tool, a convenience, a body to scrub and serve. The heartbeat of my sacrifices had been reduced to nothing more than unpaid labor. My chest tightened again, a sharp pain radiating down my arm. I pressed a hand against my heart, willing it to steady. My body carried the weight of betrayal as much as my spirit did. The walls of the house, once my refuge, felt like a cage. In the early hours, David knocked gently on my door. His voice was hushed, guilty. "Mom, you know Sophia didn't mean it. She was just joking." A joke. My entire existence dismissed with a laugh. I looked at my son's tired eyes, searching for some trace of the boy who once promised to take care of me when I grew old. But all I found was a man too afraid to challenge his wife. His words didn't soothe, they cut deeper. The following day, as Sophia cleaned up with her mother, I lingered in the hallway and overheard their whispers. "Don't worry," she told them, her tone dripping with confidence. "We'll be on the deed soon enough. This place will be ours." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. She wasn't satisfied with belittling me. She wanted to erase me entirely, from the home, from the life I had built, from my son's loyalty. That was the night my heart shattered. But it was also the night I started noticing the cracks in theirs. After that night, I began to see everything differently. Sophia's smile, her compliments, even the way she placed a hand on my shoulder, all of it felt rehearsed, calculated. She moved through the house like its queen, issuing quiet commands that disguised themselves as suggestions. "Let's eat earlier from now on, Margaret. It helps the baby's schedule." Or, "It would be best if you only took walks in the mornings. Afternoons are for us as a family." She never raised her voice, never made it sound like an order, but I felt the walls of my freedom closing in. Each day, my place shrank a little more. I became an echo in the background, summoned when needed, dismissed when not. One afternoon, as I was setting folded towels on the bathroom shelf, I heard Sophia in the next room on the phone. Her voice was light, casual, but her words cut deep. "She's just temporary, like a maid filling in until we figure things out." Temporary. As if my decades of sacrifice, my motherhood, my love, all of it was on loan, ready to be discarded when they no longer needed me. I leaned against the wall, pressing my fist against my mouth to keep from crying out. That evening, I went to the small storage closet in the hallway, searching for a box of winter clothes. Instead, I found an old metal file box I had nearly forgotten. Inside, neatly stacked, were the documents from years ago: the mortgage, the payment receipts, the deed. I pulled them out with trembling hands and sat on the floor, my breath quickening as I scanned the pages. And there it was, my name, mine alone. Margaret Whitfield, sole owner. My pulse raced as if I had unearthed buried treasure. For so long I had allowed myself to feel displaced, unwanted, stripped of belonging. Yet here was proof that I was not the guest. I was the foundation. This house, the roof above their heads, every brick and beam bore the weight of my labor, my choices, my life. I sat there until the light outside faded, the papers spread across my lap, my hands shaking. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of power return. It was small, fragile, but it was mine. And right there, in black and white, was the truth Sophia could never imagine. The next morning, I gathered the courage to take those papers to someone who could confirm what I already knew. I called Mr. Harris, the lawyer who had handled the original purchase decades ago. His voice, warm with recognition, invited me to bring the documents by his office. Sitting across from him, I watched his eyes scan each page, nodding slowly. "Yes, Margaret," he said, his tone steady. "This property is still yours, solely yours. No one else has a claim." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. Relief mingled with grief, because if the house was truly mine, then everything Sophia believed, her claims, her control, her arrogance, was built on nothing but air. But there was more. As Mr. Harris flipped through the file, he pulled out several old notes. "These are records of loans your son took from you," he explained. "Personal agreements you both signed. They were never repaid, though." The words hit me like cold water. David had borrowed money from me multiple times to cover debts, to keep afloat, to build the life he now shared with Sophia. And yet Sophia paraded around as if everything belonged to her, as if I were the intruder. She didn't even know. I left the office clutching the folder, the world around me tilting between fury and sorrow. It was never me who lived in their house, it was them who lived in mine. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed with the documents spread around me like fragile pieces of armor. I picked up the photo of my late husband, his smile frozen in time, his arm draped across my shoulders. Tears blurred my vision. "You'd be so disappointed," I whispered. "But maybe you'd also tell me to stand up now, to stop letting them treat me this way." The ache in my chest wasn't just from loss. It was from the sudden clarity that everything had shifted. I was not the burden. I was not the maid. The truth was on my side, and it was only a matter of time before they learned it. I began to watch Sophia more closely after my visit to Mr. Harris. It was as if the documents in my hands had given me new eyes. Her pride wasn't subtle anymore. She flaunted it like jewelry. One afternoon, I passed by the living room while she was chatting with a group of friends. They were sipping wine, laughing over some story, when Sophia leaned back in her chair and gestured around. "This house, it's ours," she said confidently. "We worked hard for it." The words pierced me like needles. Ours, worked hard. Every syllable was a lie. I clenched my fists in the hallway, biting back the urge to storm in and scream the truth. They clapped politely, admiring her for what she claimed, and she beamed as though the applause were proof of ownership. My chest burned. It wasn't ignorance. It was arrogance. Her entire cruelty toward me was rooted in greed and pride. If she admitted that I was the foundation, her illusion would crumble. So she erased me instead. But arrogance is careless. Later that evening, I found another file tucked inside David's desk drawer while putting away freshly ironed shirts. It wasn't hidden well, just shoved between bills. My curiosity led me to unfold the papers, and as I read, my hands began to tremble. It was a property transfer form, half completed with David's signature scrawled at the bottom. But where my name should have been, there was only an empty line. Sophia had tried to make David sign away the house into their joint names, without me. Of course, it was never filed, never valid, because I was the sole owner. But the attempt itself spoke volumes. I sank into the chair, the paper shaking in my hand. It wasn't just disrespect anymore, it was calculated deceit. She had tried to rewrite history, to erase my claim, to forge legitimacy through paperwork. It was a shocking confirmation that her cruelty wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. That night, as I folded the documents back into my box, my reflection in the window stared at me with both fear and resolve. My whole life, I had avoided confrontation, convincing myself that endurance was strength. But now their scheme lay bare before me. They thought they had it all figured out. But I held the peace they'd never expect. I began preparing quietly. Every evening when the house grew still, I gathered my papers, the deed, the receipts, the loan records, and now the attempted transfer. I placed them in a single folder, neatly organized, so there would be no doubt when the moment came. I told no one. My silence was my shield. Still, I was not unshaken. Some nights I sat alone in my room with a pen and a notebook, writing down my thoughts, my fears, my memories of the life I once had with David before it was tainted by Sophia's influence. My hand would tremble, ink smearing the page as tears blurred my vision. I wasn't plotting revenge like some cold strategist. I was a mother, broken and betrayed, struggling to find the courage to demand the respect I had long been denied. Sometimes I would clutch the photograph of my late husband. "What would you do?" I whispered into the silence. In those moments, my grief softened me, reminding me that love had once lived here, too. The pause in my anger gave me breath, gave the audience of my life a glimpse into my humanity. But every time Sophia sneered, every time she corrected me as if I were a servant, the fire inside reignited. The time for quiet endurance had passed. The next family gathering would be my battlefield, not with weapons of cruelty, but with truth laid bare. I didn't plan to shout or humiliate. I didn't need to. The truth itself was enough to unravel her. My justice would come not from anger, but from exposure. I would hand her the very keys she assumed were hers, and with them, the weight of a mortgage she never dreamed she'd face. And so, I waited, patient, silent. My folder of secrets ready, my heart steadying itself for the storm to come. The night of the second gathering arrived, and the house buzzed with conversation and the clinking of glasses. Sophia was radiant, bustling about with practiced ease, her parents sitting proudly at the head of the table as if the home already belonged to their daughter. I stayed quiet, arranging plates and refilling drinks, my folder tucked away in the corner of the room. My heart pounded steadily, not from fear, but from anticipation. Tonight would not end like the last. Tonight the truth would breathe. The dinner flowed smoothly until dessert. Guests laughed, stories spun, and the wine loosened tongues. Then, as if she couldn't resist, Sophia turned her gaze toward me, her voice light but sharp enough to cut. "Margaret keeps this house like a maid," she said, smiling broadly as if it were a compliment. A few chuckles slipped from the table, but the room chilled instantly. This time, I didn't force a smile. I didn't shrink into the background. Slowly, I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Every eye turned to me. I walked around the table, calm, deliberate, until I stood beside Sophia. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out the keys to the house, and placed them in her hand. "If I'm the maid," I said, my voice steady, carrying through the silence, "then you'll have no problem paying the mortgage. This house isn't yours. It's mine." For a moment, there was only stillness. The clink of a glass being set down, the rustle of someone shifting uncomfortably in their chair. Sophia's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the keys as though they might bite. David's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like a man struggling for breath. Her parents looked from one to the other, confused, waiting for someone to explain. I didn't leave them waiting long. From the side table, I lifted the folder I had prepared, thick with papers worn soft from years of handling. I spread them across the dining table like cards in a game they never knew they were playing. Deeds with my name alone, receipts for every payment, loan records showing David's debts to me, never repaid, and finally the attempted transfer Sophia had pushed, incomplete and invalid. "This house was bought with my blood, my tears, my years," I said. "Every wall, every floorboard, mine. And when you tried to erase me, when you called me the maid in front of everyone, you forgot something important. Truth leaves paper trails." The room was silent except for Sophia's ragged breathing. Her hands trembled as she pushed the papers aside, her voice cracking. "This isn't fair. You can't just—" "Can't?" I cut her off gently, almost kindly. "I don't need to do anything but show you what has always been true. You've been living in my home, under my roof, calling me a servant. Pride blinded you, Sophia. Greed poisoned you." David pushed back his chair, standing now, but his words stumbled. "Mom, I didn't—" I turned to him, and my heart broke at the sight of the boy I had raised, standing as a man who had chosen silence over loyalty. "Son," I said softly but firmly, "choose wisely. Is your loyalty to your wife's pride or to the truth?" The weight of the room pressed on him. Sophia's parents shifted, their faces pale with shame. Sophia clutched the keys in her fist until her knuckles whitened, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice cracking into hysteria. "You can't just take everything away." But I didn't need to raise my voice. I simply gestured to the documents spread before them. "I'm not taking anything. It was never yours to begin with." David lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes, silence sealing his choice before he even spoke. Sophia wailed, her pride unraveling in front of the very audience she sought to impress. The sound of her sobs filled the space where her arrogance had once reigned. I gathered my papers back into the folder, leaving the keys on the table. My voice softened, steady with finality. The truth doesn't need permission. It stands whether you accept it or not. And with that, I stepped away from the table, the echo of my footsteps carrying me out of the dining room. Behind me, chaos rippled, a woman's pride shattered, a son's silence exposed, and a family forced to face the truth they had long ignored. In the weeks that followed, I made my decision. I packed my belongings, the books I had cherished, the garden tools that once brought me peace, a few photographs of the life I had built, and left the house that no longer felt like home. It wasn't an act of surrender, it was liberation. I rented a small apartment near the library with a balcony that overlooked a quiet street where the sun set in golden hues. For the first time in years, I woke each morning without walking on eggshells, without listening for Sophia's orders disguised as pleasantries. The air felt different, lighter, freer. David came to see me not long after I moved. He stood at my door, shoulders slumped, eyes heavy with shame. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I should have defended you. I should have been stronger." His words carried regret but also desperation, as if seeking absolution. I placed a hand on his arm, feeling both love and sorrow. "David, I raised you to be a man, not a shadow. You cannot hide behind silence forever. If you want to change, you must do it for yourself, not for me." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes, but I knew change would be a long road. For now, my forgiveness was a closed door he would have to learn to unlock on his own. As for Sophia, her humiliation lingered. Word of the confrontation had spread quickly among both families. She had lost face in front of her parents. Her pride shattered. The cracks in her marriage widened. Pride had once been her armor, but now it weighed her down. And though I felt no triumph in her downfall, I recognized the justice in it. Greed and arrogance had finally consumed her, leaving only the ashes of her own making. One evening, I brewed a cup of tea and settled into my new living room. A record player spun softly, filling the space with music from my youth. I closed my eyes and let the melody carry me back to simpler days, when my husband's laughter filled the kitchen, when David was just a boy running barefoot through the yard. My heart ached, but not with bitterness, with gratitude. The pain had taught me strength, and the loss had taught me value. For the first time, I felt truly at peace. Looking back, I realized the journey had carved something new in me. A mother's sacrifice is meant to be honored, not mocked. Yet even when the honor never comes, the strength of that sacrifice remains. My scars were proof of love given freely, but they were also proof of resilience. I began to write, filling page after page in a journal. I told the story of what had happened, not for revenge, not for pity, but as a lesson. A mother's sacrifice should never be repaid with humiliation, I wrote. If you let greed blind you, you will lose everything. Pride may win you applause for a moment, but truth waits patiently, and when it arrives, it strips away the mask. As I wrote, I felt lighter. The words were no longer just for me. They were for every woman who had been silenced in her own family, for every mother who had been reduced to a shadow in the home she had built. If my pain could give them courage, then it was not in vain. Sometimes, late at night, I still wondered if David would find his way back to me, if he would shed the fear that chained him to Sophia's pride. I hoped so. But whether he did or not, I had found something more important: myself. The story did not end with revenge. It ended with truth, with dignity reclaimed, with a quiet strength that no one could strip away. And as I locked the door of my new home, I knew one thing. This time, the keys were only mine.